say laughter is the best medicine, but what if it kills you? What if you couldn't stop laughing? What if your side split open and you died from the sheer joy of it all? Or worse, what if you couldn't stop moving, no matter how much your body begged you to rest? If you answered yes to either of those questions, then I have some good news for you. It happened to a lot of people back in 1518. So, keep watching to find out just how deadly, uncontrollable laughter and dancing can be. Welcome to my channel. It's July, and the year is 1518. The sun beats down on the cobbled streets of Strasbourg, a bustling medieval town. A young woman named Frau Trophäa is making her way home from the market. She's just bought a loaf of bread, some cheese, and a chicken, and she can't wait to get home and start cooking. But just as she reaches her front door, she hears something that makes her stop in her tracks. It's a sound that she and every other person in town will soon come to dread. It's laughter, only it's not just any laughter. It's a sound filled with such unrestrained joy that Trophäa can't help but smile. But when she turns around to try to see who's making the noise, she finds nothing out of the ordinary. And so she shrugs it off and heads inside to get started on dinner. But the next day, Trophäa wakes up, and the laughter is still there. This time, it seems to be coming from one of her neighbors, an old man who lives alone and spends most of his time making shoes. He's always been a little odd, but Trophäa has never heard him make a sound like this before. And at first, she thinks maybe he's lost his mind. And yet, despite the fact that she's alarmed by the sound of his madness, Trophäa can't help but smile whenever she hears it, and she isn't the only one. In fact, soon, the whole town of Strasbourg will be smiling and laughing along with the old shoemaker. But that's still a long way off. For now, Trophäa just shakes her head at the sound and tries to focus on her work. Then, a few days later, as Trophäa is hanging up some laundry, she sees something strange. Her neighbor, the old shoemaker, is in the street and he's dancing. Well, that's not exactly strange, she thinks. People dance all the time. But the more she watches, the stranger his dancing becomes. He throws his arms and legs about in wild motions, and he spins around in circles until he falls to the ground, exhausted. And yet, despite being utterly knackered, the old man immediately gets back up and starts dancing again. Trophäa stands there watching in stunned silence as the old man dances himself into a frenzy. At first, she thinks maybe he's drunk, but she can smell the stale waste of ale on him, and he clearly isn't. Then suddenly, without warning, the old man drops to his knees and gasps for air. His face is red, his eyes are wide, and he looks like he might pass out at any second. Treva steps forward to help him, but before she can lay a hand on him, he does something that makes her take a step back in surprise. He starts dancing again, and if that wasn't strange enough, he doesn't stop. Over the next few days, the old man dances non-stop, night and day. He eats, drinks, and sleeps while dancing, and after a week, he finally collapses and dies right in the middle of a jig. By this point, everyone in the town has seen what's going on, and they can't believe their eyes. They've never seen anyone dance themselves to death before, and they don't know what to make of it. But that's when things start to get really weird. You see, the day after the old man dies, Trophäa hears that same uncontrollable laughter that drove him mad, and this time she knows exactly where it's coming from. It's her neighbor, a young woman who was perfectly healthy when Trophäa saw her last. But now, the woman is in the street and she's dancing like the old man did. But unlike the old man, the young woman doesn't stop. and over the next few days she grows weaker and weaker until she too dies right in the middle of a dance. And after she dies, Tropia sees the same thing happen to 2 more people, and then 3, and then 4. Every time someone dies, they are replaced by another person who exhibits the same symptoms. And as the number of dancers grows, so does their energy. They move faster and faster until they're like a whirlwind of limbs and flailing bodies. And when the moon is full, they dance under its light until the break of dawn. By now, everyone in the town is terrified. They don't know what's causing this plague of dancing, but they know they need to do something before it's too late. So they turn to the local priest for help. Surely a man of God will know how to stop these strange goings-on. But the priest is no help at all. In fact, when he goes out into the streets to try to calm the dancers down, he finds himself overcome with uncontrollable laughter, and he joins them in their frenzied dance. Soon, half the town is infected, and the whole place is a whirl of flailing bodies and hysterical laughter. And even though most of the people in the town are too afraid to go outside, that doesn't stop the dancing plague from spreading. Infected people hide in their homes, and the sound of their maniacal laughter and dancing echoes through the walls. Even those who haven't been infected yet can hear the sounds, and they too find themselves overcome with laughter and dancing. Before long, the entire town is infected. People dance in the streets, in the market, even in church. Men, women, and children are alike victims of this mysterious illness. Some are too weak to continue dancing and they collapse in the street. Others are driven mad and never stop moving until they die. After a month, half the town is dead. Those who didn't die were too weak to even stand. The dancing plague seemed to come out of nowhere, and no one could explain why so many people were infected. But there were rumors that it had something to do with the heat. After all, it was the hottest summer on record, and maybe that's what caused this strange outbreak. Or perhaps it was divine punishment for the sins of the town. But whatever the cause, the people of Strasbourg knew that they needed to do something to stop the dancing plague. So they turned to the experts. A doctor was summoned, and he quickly went to work, trying to figure out what was causing the dancing plague. He questioned those who had been infected, looking for a common link or a shared symptom, and he examined the bodies of those who had died, searching for signs of foul play or disease. But the doctor found nothing. There was no answer to the dancing plague, and as the days went by, more and more people became infected. Soon, the entire town was dancing. But despite the chaos and fear, there was one person who remained calm. That was Dr. John, the man who had been summoned to stop the plague. He may not have been able to cure the sick, but he knew that the best thing he could do was to stay calm and carry on as normal. And so, he continued his work, treating those who were ill and burying the dead. And as the weeks went by, he noticed something strange. Those who were infected with the dancing plague seemed to be getting better. At first, the recovery was slow, but as time went on, more and more people were able to return to their normal lives. The dancing plague had come to an end, and as the people of Strasbourg slowly began to rebuild their lives, they knew that they had survived something truly terrible. Some said it was a miracle, others said it was divine retribution. But whatever the cause, the dancing plague of 1518 was a terrifying reminder of the fragility of life. Now you need to watch what really killed Ivan the Terrible, or have a look at this. Over 400 people infected, possibly more. The city officials bring in musicians, thinking that it will cure them, but it only makes things worse. What is this horror story? scariest disease you've never heard about, the dancing plague of 1518. But before we continue with the video, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss any new videos. Thanks. Now let's get back to the video. Imagine the year 1518. You are strolling down the cobblestone streets of Strasbourg, a bustling medieval city in what is now France. You see people dancing in the street, men, women, children, all seemingly possessed by an unseen force. They dance wildly, leaping and twirling, their eyes blank and unseeing. At first you might think it's a celebration, maybe a religious festival, or a royal visit. But as you watch, you realize there's something deeply disturbing about their movements. Their bodies contort into unnatural angles, their faces contorted in pain and ecstasy. It's not a dance, it's a terrifying spectacle of madness. And as you soon realize, it's just the beginning. As the dancing continues day after day, the dancers become weaker and weaker, collapsing in the streets, dead from exhaustion or heart failure. Entire families are wiped out, victims succumbing to the relentless rhythm that seems to control their every move. Soon, you find yourself caught up in the growing panic. Are these people cursed? Is there a terrible disease spreading through the town? Can you escape the fate that seems to be overtaking everyone? This was the reality for those who lived through the strange and terrifying event known as the Dancing Plague of 1518. In July of 1518, a man was seen dancing in the streets of Strasbourg. He danced all day and all night, and he didn't stop until he died from exhaustion. Soon, others joined him, and then others, and then hundreds. Within a few weeks, over 400 people were dancing themselves to death. At first, no one knew what to make of the outbreak. Some thought it was a sign of the end times, while others blamed it on witchcraft or demonic possession. However, there are three main theories as to what caused the dancing plague. The first theory is that the dancing plague was caused by ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye and other grains. It produces a number of toxic compounds that can cause a variety of symptoms, including convulsions, hallucinations, and uncontrolled movements. The fungus is caused by a mold called Aspergillus fumigatus, which grows on grains when they are stored in damp conditions. This mold produces a number of toxic compounds, including one called fumigaclavine C, which has hallucinogenic effects. It is possible that the people who were dancing drank or ate food that was contaminated with this mold, leading to the outbreak. Symptoms of ergot poisoning can include convulsions, hallucinations, and uncontrolled movements, all of which were observed in the victims of the dancing plague. Additionally, the fungus grows on rye, which was a staple of the diet in 16th century Europe. It is possible that the people who were dancing were exposed to contaminated rye, leading to the outbreak. However, there is no direct evidence to support this theory, and it remains just one possibility among many. The second theory is that the dancing plague was a case of mass hysteria. Mass hysteria is a psychological phenomenon in which a group of people share similar symptoms that cannot be explained by any physical illness. These symptoms are often the result of stress and anxiety, and can include convulsions, paralysis, and even hallucinations. In the case of the dancing plague, it is possible that the outbreak was triggered by a combination of factors such as famine, stress, and the plague. These factors could have created an atmosphere of fear and anxiety in which people were more susceptible to mass hysteria. Additionally, the lack of medical knowledge at the time would have made it difficult to distinguish between a physical illness and a psychological one. This theory is supported by the fact that the dancing plague occurred during during a time of great stress and upheaval in Europe. The continent was in the midst of the Black Death, a devastating plague that killed millions of people. Additionally, there had been a period of famine in the years leading up to the outbreak, which may have contributed to the overall sense of anxiety and desperation. Finally, the outbreak occurred in Strasbourg, a city that had been heavily impacted by the Black Death. This suggests that the outbreak may have been triggered by a combination of factors related to the plague and the famine. The third theory is that the dancing plague was a curse. Some believe that the plague was a punishment from Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers. Legend has it that Saint Vitus was a Roman soldier who was persecuted for his Christian beliefs. He was eventually put to death, but not before he had cured a king's daughter of a mysterious illness. As a reward, the king allowed Saint Vitus to establish a church in his honor. However, some believe that Saint Vitus was not a benevolent saint, but rather a tricksy one who could bring misfortune upon those who angered him. The dancing plague may have been seen as a punishment from Saint Vitus for some perceived slight or sin. This theory is not supported by any historical evidence and is largely based on folklore and legend. However, it is an interesting way of looking at the outbreak and the beliefs of the time. So, what actually happened to the people dancing in the streets? We do know exactly what happened to each person, because records from that time are incomplete, and most of the information we have comes from a single eyewitness account by an Augustinian monk named Gaspar Spener. According to Spener, the dancing began with a single woman and soon spread to others. The victims were unable to stop dancing, even if they wanted to, and they continued to do so until they died. Some died from exhaustion, while others suffered heart failure. Still, others simply collapsed from the strain. The plague lasted for several weeks, during which time it is estimated that around 400 people died. The eyewitness accounts of the plague describe how the dancers moved erratically and sometimes violently, leaping and twirling in ways that seemed superhuman. Many of them were completely naked, which was seen as a sign of their madness. Others wore grotesque masks that made them look like animals or demons. The dancers were said to have been possessed by a kind of dark energy that drove them to dance without stopping until they died. In the midst of this chaos, the city officials tried everything they could to stop the dancing. They brought in musicians, thinking that the dancers would be drawn to the music and stop dancing. But this only made things worse, as the sound of the drums, flutes, and violins seemed to drive the dancers further into a frenzy. Other attempts to stop the dancing, such as using whips and chains, also failed. The dancers could not be stopped, and they continued to move until they dropped from exhaustion. After the plague finally ended, the people of Strasbourg were left to wonder what had caused it and why it had struck their city. Theories abounded, but no one knew for sure. Some blamed it on the devil himself, while others saw it as a punishment from God. Still others believed that it was simply a mysterious illness that had come to test their faith. In the centuries since the dancing plague, historians have tried to shed light on this bizarre event. While there is no consensus on what caused the dancing plague, there are a number of theories. One popular theory is that it was a case of mass hysteria, in which a large group of people shared similar symptoms that could not be explained by any physical illness. Another theory is that the plague was caused by a fungus called ergot, which can grow on rye and other grains. Ergot poisoning can cause a variety of symptoms, including convulsions, hallucinations, and uncontrolled movements. all of which were observed in the victims of the dancing plague. Whatever the cause, the dancing plague of 1518 was a terrifying event that left a lasting impression on the people of Strasbourg. The image of hundreds of people dancing themselves to death in the streets is a haunting reminder of the power of the human mind and the mysteries of the past. And with that, our journey through the scariest diseases you've never heard of comes to an end. Did you enjoy learning about the dancing plague of 1518? If so, I invite you to stay tuned for more terrifying tales of history's most frightening epidemics. Just click the link on screen now to reveal the next horrifying chapter. Now here's a question for you. Was it madness or something darker? Would you have been able to resist the dance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks for watching.